In the last module, we talked about what Agile is, how we use it, and what's hard about it, how we make it actually work. And one of the central elements that we talked about is this user story. And its formulation is very simple and obvious, and we talked about the benefits of some of these clauses, but when we really dig in, we learn that creating good user stories is something that we continually get better at and that we continue to collaborate with using the wisdom of our team and our experience with actual users. So who is this person that we're going to build this product for? What makes them tick? What do they care about? We need to stay curious and at the same time stay organized about how we gather that understanding, encapsulate it, and share it with the rest of our team. And then we need to keep an eye on what do they care about and how do we know if we're delivering something that's valuable to them, and we need to keep an eye on that too. In this module, we're going to learn about how to use personas, problem scenarios, and alternatives to encapsulate that material in a systematic way that's not a lot of work, that doesn't just happen at the beginning of a project and become stale, but rather it's an integral part of our everyday work when we think about what we know, when we talk about how we're going to implement, and then when we look forward at how we'll validate if what we're doing is valuable to the user. And then we're also going to learn how to do field discovery so that we can go and talk to users, even if they're in our building, even if they're out somewhere else, and actually create nice, strong personas. We've been using this venture design process to kind of think about where everything stitches together and where we ought to be focused. So here, we're going to be principally focused on these two items. Now, when I was a kid, my dad said to me, he's a doctor, he said, "Alex, take care of your colon and it'll take care of you." And I was like, what's a colon? If you take care of these personas and these problem scenarios and you look after them, you will always have a nice, strong foundation to use in building really good user stories. Well, let's start with the persona. And what do we really mean by personas and this practice of design thinking? Well, in the simplest possible terms, design thinking has these two pillars, empathy and creativity. So back when somebody had ideas about the seamstress by observing him or her and seeing that they needed a more precise cutting instrument, that they needed a way to not get so fatigued over the course of the day. And, who knows how many iterations it took, but somebody figured out the sewing scissor. And that's a great example, a simplified but great example of design thinking. I'll give you another. Now that I'm old, I moved out of the city and I live in the country. And in the country, we found that at our new country house, we had mice. So I thought, well, okay, I'll use design thinking to solve this problem. And so I first, through primary and secondary sources, so direct observation and talking to others, I started to learn about my subject. I learned the kind of places that the mice get into the house. I learned that, interesting fact, mice have no bladder control, so they just kind of urinate as they go. We'll come back to that. They prefer the edges of walls, keeps them out of harm's way. And they're very quick. Your typical Tom and Jerry mousetrap will not actually catch a mouse. They'll often get away. And then finally, another kind of myth about mice, they like peanut butter more than they like cheese. So then I use this to apply creative, focused, valuable solutions to getting rid of the mice with a minimum of bloodshed and trouble for both myself and the mice. I first went around and patched up those places where I'd found the mice could get into the house. I used a UV light to find out where they were. Interesting fact about that, a UV light will show you the presence of bodily fluids in the dark. I put the mice traps on the sides of the walls. I found this mousetrap, snap ease they call them, and this only articulates 90 degrees instead of 180 degrees, so it's a lot faster. And then finally, I used peanut butter in the trap instead of cheese. And we got rid of the mice, and it wasn't too terrible. It was pretty effective. So when we have more complex problems and more complex subjects like people, we use personas. And these are humanized views of who our user is and what makes them tick. And we're not doing this just because, hey, it's good to humanize things. It turns out that for all the dozens and dozens of little questions that will come up about what you should build for these people, how you should support it, how you should sell it, that this is the most vivid, most actionable, and most testable way to achieve valuable outcomes on a reliable basis. So, for example, as we're creating personas with students, I'll often ask them, what kind of shoes would this persona wear? And that's not because I'm encouraging to sell them shoes or make shoes for them, but again, it's this humanized view of who they are that turns out to be the most actionable way to get reliable innovation that connects with demand that's valuable to the user. We've walked through the persona and we've looked at how to texture out and improve this key element that'll be a part of every single user story you write. You've learned why they're important, and we've looked at how to make them practical and operational with think, see, feel, do.